Hello everyone, welcome to your practice today. Our focus today is going to be on hip mobility. In terms of what you need for your practice, it might be that you want 1 or 2 blocks, but they're not necessarily a requirement. And although I'm sat on a mat, this is a practice that you can do on any surface that is available to you. With that being said, we're going to start with our knees bent and our feet out in front. They can be reasonably wide, so much wider than hip distance. The hands we're going to bring behind the back body. It doesn't matter exactly where the fingers are facing towards. And we're going to just for a moment think of allowing our chest to lift up towards the sky. Opening along the fronts of the shoulders, maybe drawing the shoulder blades together. Taking a deep breath in here and exhaling to sigh it out. We'll begin a little bit of gentle movement into our hips with some windshield wipers. Maybe as we start, thinking of trying to keep the torso facing forward rather than moving from side to side. Just so we're aware what kind of range we might be working with in our practice, at least at the start. And then we can maybe see if that changes throughout the practice or later on in our day. So allowing the knees to knock from side to side. And then making that movement a little bit bigger by now allowing us to more turn the torso towards one side and then the other. How does this change what's going on in the body? Now that we're not only moving through the hips, but also allowing some movement through the other part of the body as well. Coming back through center, we're going to find ourselves in a 90-90 pose. And whilst it doesn't have to be the most exact 90-90, we are looking for a place where we will feel that sensation within the hip, and we can feel us moving into our range. So it might be that we attempt to get somewhere close to that space. Absolutely fine if the back knee isn't down on the ground. We can always prop it up with a block. Or alternatively, if you'll notice on my other side, if you have a little lean on with the way that the femoral head is situated in the hip socket and the hip socket structure, it might be that the hand comes down onto a block. Right, so in our 90-90, we're going to start with our left hand on our hip. Again, the right hand might be out to support you, torso facing forward. And we're going to start to roll that left hip forward and roll it back. Roll it forward and roll it back. Maybe noticing if we feel another part of the body moving and trying to get as much movement coming from the hip as possible. Where do we feel the sensation the most? Coming to set the hip back down. Potentially we might take the left hand behind the head with the elbow out towards the side, and we're going to find ourselves twisting towards the right thigh. So inhale up through the crown of the head and exhale to twist, elbow somewhere towards the thigh. And back. Inhale up and exhale, twist and fold. We'll continue this for a few rounds of breath. What part of the body, which hip is allowing this movement to occur? How does it maybe feel different from our rolling forward and back? Coming back up through center, this time taking one or both hands to the front shin. We're going to do some of what is called pails and rails. Here we're going to harness our internal strength and initially act as if we're trying to draw the shin away from the ground and press the shin into the hands, but the hands are stopping it, as well as we can imagine that the leg or the shin is stuck in this like treacly, like gluey mess and it just can't pull away from the earth. as if that isn't enough of an image to get you going. If proportions won't allow you to touch the thigh, you can use a block here. And in fact, I'm going to use a block because I find that sometimes that gives me a little bit more feedback than just having my hands on the leg. Now, when we're ready, in 3, 2, 1, drive the shin away from the ground into the block, with the block being unmoving, the shin not actually moving, and feel what parts of the body light up. Here we'll progressively start to ramp up the effort with which we're trying to pull the shin away from the earth. So it might be that you start with like 20%, then move to 30%, 40%, 50%, and the last few moments here, as high as a percentage as you can muster, and release. Give yourself a little shimmy. Be mindful maybe on the next round that we come into shortly, if you're holding on really tight in the shoulders or what your face is doing. Mobility work is always hilarious for the faces I pull. When we're ready, we'll begin again in 3, 2, 1. You can tell also when I'm doing mobility work that I'm doing it alongside you, because the concentration or my focus on the words that come out of my mouth is not necessarily ideal or sensical. You're ramping up that internal strength that you're using to try and draw that shin away from the ground. For 3, for 2, for 1, and release. Little shimmy, little shimmy, little shimmy. Final go when we're ready in 3, 2, 1. This is one of those types of practices that it might not look like anything much is happening, but perhaps you might be working the hardest and encouraging the most like strength and focus of any other area of your practice. And release. Now you might take a moment to kind of shimmy the hips out. You can always extend the legs. Ooh. Although we will return back to that 90-90. Hands and or block in the same place, but this time instead of thinking of pulling the shin away from the ground, we're acting as if we're trying to pull it away from the block and press it firmly, firmly, firmly down into the earth. When you're ready, in 3, 2, 1, and go. Imagining as if you're trying to dig out that hole and burrow your leg down into the ground. Again, perhaps progressively building up as you spend more time focusing and your attention grows to the task at hand. And release. When we're ready, we'll begin again, driving the shin towards the earth as if we're stuck or glued to the block or the hands and we're trying to tear ourselves away. Maybe realizing we've lost our focus and allowing that strength to progressively build before we allow ourselves to release. One more go in 3, 2, 1. Focus, intention, purpose, resilience. And release. Take a little moment again if you need to shake out the legs. Shimmy them from side to side. And we'll return back to 90-90 once more. For a little bit of focus on that back leg. And when we're ready, we're going to imagine and potentially actually lift the back foot off the ground. Being mindful here, again, where the movement is coming from. You can use your hands to steady you, to keep you stable. Even if it's just a whisper thin bit of paper that you can imagine that you're sliding underneath the foot. And release. Lifting the back knee up, trying to keep the torso forward. How is this sensation different to the movement you've just done? And releasing back down to the ground. We'll do a few of going back and forth between those movements. So when you're ready, we'll lift up the back heel. Drop it down. Lift up the back knee. Back knee down, heel up. Drop it down, knee up. One more time. Foot up. Foot down, knee up. And maybe here, allowing yourself to slightly turn to the left so that you can take your left hand to the outside of that left leg. Pushing the leg into the hand providing some resistance here. For 5, for 4, for 3, for 2, and 1. Feel free to release the legs out again. You might take those windshield wiper legs if you wish. And we'll find our 90-90 on the other side. This side may look very, very different. I always talk about my left hip. In fact, I might use the block here to steady myself, to keep myself a little bit more upright. We're going to start by rolling that back hip forward and back. Forward and back. Forward and back. One more time, forward and back. This time finding that twist. So it might be that the right hand comes behind the head. We lift up through the crown and we twist and fold. Coming back up. Twist and fold. Doing this a couple more times. The movement doesn't have to be quick. If anything, slowing down the movement in a mobility practice helps you to realize where the movement is stemming from and if that is our actual intention at that moment. Bringing yourself back up. Both hands, or maybe just one hand if the stability of the block is useful, underneath the other one. And we're going to find where we're pushing into the hand or a block with our left shin, as if we're trying to pull the shin away from the earth. So when you're ready, we'll begin. We're going to drive that shin away from the ground, pull it away from the earth and into the hand, the prop, the block, building up gradually the intensity of that sensation. Like you're speeding up in a car and you can see the speedometer gradually building, or you're climbing that hill and release. Little shimmy, little hip wiggle, and begin again. I like to think of that like you're gradually building up to speed and then you get to full on, I'm going the fastest I need to go for whatever I'm trying to accomplish. And releasing. One more time. You might imagine that it's like when you're putting water on the boil. I mean, go with me with these random examples. You're putting water on to boil and gradually you just see a couple tiny little bubbles start to percolate underneath the surface. Then maybe they broach the surface or start to actually come to like fruition, and then you've eventually got this rolling, bubbling, boiling pan. And release. Trying to distract you with my words so that you perhaps are more resilient through the intensity. We're going to do the opposite now, where we dig the shin down towards the ground as if our hand or block is stuck to it with super glue and you're trying to pull away with all your might. So in 3, 2, 1, begin. Driving down, 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 down. And it doesn't matter whether the leg is actually in contact with the ground or not, but you're trying to move it in that direction. The intention here is key. And release. Little shimmy, little shimmy. And again we go, drive down, press down. Movements like this I find are really useful for when you come into poses like pigeon pose and perhaps you want to be more active. The driving of the shin down will allow you to reach the hands away from the earth. And release. Final time, drive down, dig down, deeper, further, faster, harder. Use all your might, more might than you knew you were capable of. For 3, for 2, for 1. A little shimmy again, you might come to find the legs either extend or the windshield wiper. Doesn't have to look a particular way, just anything that helps you maybe move out of a potential cramp. And 90-90 for our back foot. As we did before, the back foot, try and lift away from the ground. Notice where the sensation stems from in that hip socket. And release. That back knee, we're going to lift away from the ground. Interesting to notice if it feels like it's going as far or not as far as on the other side. Just acknowledging again that there are differences in both our sides, not just difference from person to person. And release. And we'll do this little back and forth we played with earlier, where we lift up the back foot, place it down, lift up the back knee. You may notice that I'm also trying to concentrate with all my might as we're moving through this to try and keep everything reasonably neutral apart from the movement coming from my hip. And the next time we lift the knee away, we can always turn slightly more towards the side. So we can press the right hand on the outside of the right thigh and think drive the thigh in towards the hand, and the hand is fighting back. Breathing here for 3, for 2, for 1. You might release to the side to find the windshield wiper legs once more, or a shimmy of the legs out in front of you. Before finding your way to a Baddha Konasana or bound angle, by all means you can prop your sit bones up on something to give you a little bit more height. So soles of the feet together. I say soles of the feet. Yeah, that's right. I was like, a sole, I was just thinking it was a heel. Good old babbling. You tell that mobility work has really gone to my head. You might start with a gentle flutter here. Sometimes this is referred to butterfly pose. Me being real American, I was going to say in kindergarten, used to do this all the time, but maybe nursery school. And then we're going to find a hinge or a fold forward. It might not be a massive movement, but finding the heart reaching forward before the crown of the head. We might hold on to the feet or the shins. Feel the sensation on the inside of the hips, the groin. We'll stay here for a few rounds of breath. And when we're ready, we'll start to lift ourselves gently out. It might be that the forearms can come to rest on the inside of the legs, whether you're holding your feet or the shins, or alternatively, you might find that you want a block underneath the forearms. So you've got, again, that feedback of thigh against block and forearm against block. I'll demonstrate with blocks, but by all means, it can be forearms on thighs. Similar to the pattern of things that we did in our 90-90, we're going to allow ourselves to first start by trying to draw the legs away from the earth and towards the block, but obviously the block is here stopping it. So no actual proper movement is going to occur. It's all coming from that internal strength, so internal rather than external. When we're ready, we'll draw the legs up towards us and away from the ground. The breath is key here for helping you to find your focus and help you to be resilient. Keep pushing, keep striving for 3, for 2, for 1, and let it go. Maybe those little butterfly flutters. When we're ready, we'll go again and engage. Don't know how heavy my breath will be on the mic. But in solidarity, I'm doing this alongside you. For 3. For 2, for 1, release. Before we decide we've had enough, we'll go again and begin. Anything you need to do with other parts of your body. So similarly, like I'm going to draw my hands into fists or scrunched up my face. One thing we don't want to do is hold that breath. Last final push in this direction for 3, for 2, for 1, and release. Flutter, 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 flutter. I'm sure you can gather we're going to go in the opposite direction. So to begin, we'll start to draw our legs down towards the ground as if we're trying to drive them down through the earth or rip them away from the forearm or the block that's resting against them. So trying to release the pressure of those props, arms against the legs. As we're breathing here and building up that strength, that pull, that draw away, how does this feel different to when we were drawing up? Like what parts of the hips can we really feel this in? And release. Flutter, flutter, flutter. As Nelly would say when she's pretending to be a butterfly. Flutter, flutter, flutter. When we're ready, drive the legs down towards the ground. For 3, for 2, for 1. Flutter, 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 flutter. One more time, drive down, breathe strong, be strong. Strong in your intention, your focus, your actual internal strength. And release. The blocks may come to the side. We're going to find a bit of stillness in this butterfly pose. So we might again reach the crown of the head up towards the sky, the heart forward, and think hinge at the hips. Allowing ourselves to then fold the head down. I kind of start by just doing this little rock in and out of this place. There's something quite soothing about giving yourself a little rock from side to side or front to back, up and down. And then maybe finding stillness. Breathing here, enjoying just being rather than doing. That intention, that focus can now be on just being here. And this might take a lot of strength in itself to just be. Strength isn't always yang and loud and fiery. Bringing ourselves up and out only if we are ready to do so. You might gently take the hands to the outside of the thighs and draw the legs together. I'm going to take the hands behind me, feet reasonably wide again, but this time allow the knees to knock in towards one another. Deep breath in and out. Any little movements of the hips you need to be able to then get up off the mat, feel free to take them. It was a pleasure to guide your practice this evening, this day, this morning, whenever it might be that you're practicing.